Spooky Scrapbook, December 23rd, 2025.
The empty chair. Every Christmas, one chair was left empty at our table. It had been so long that no one remembered who it was for, only that it must remain. My mother said it was a custom older than the house itself. A courtesy, she called it, for those who still remembered the way home. That year, the snow fell early and the fire burned low. As supper was laid, my father paused. The empty chair had been pulled back from the table. No one claimed to have moved it. We sat in silence as the meal began. The room felt colder than it should have. The candles flickered without draught. Then came the sound. A slow creak, like wood under weight. My mother's eyes fixed on the empty place, and she whispered, "He never liked being forgotten." No one spoke after that. When morning came, the plate before the empty chair was bare. Crumbs lay where no hand had been seen. The chair has never been empty again. Night 3. The children beneath the snow. In our town, children were warned never to play in the churchyard after the first Christmas snow. The ground, the elders said, remembered small feet. On Christmas morning, fresh snow lay untouched across the graves, smooth and white as linen. All but one path. Tiny footprints crossed the yard, weaving between the stones. Barefoot. Too small for any grown soul. They did not lead in. They led out. The sexton barred the gate and told us not to look again. But each Christmas Eve, the prints returned, circling the headstones, wandering closer to the road. One year, my younger sister followed them. She returned before dusk, pale and trembling, her shoes soaked through. When asked where the footprints ended, she only shook her head and whispered, "They stopped waiting." She never spoke of it again. When she died the following spring, we buried her beneath fresh snow. That Christmas, new footprints joined the old ones, and this time, they led toward our door. Night 4. The candle in the window. In our family, a candle was always lit on Christmas Eve. It was placed in the front window just after dusk and left burning until morning. A guide, my grandmother said, for those who wandered and wished to find their way home. The year my grandfather died, the candle burned lower than usual. Near midnight, I noticed something strange. The flame did not stand upright. It leaned inward, away from the glass, stretching thin, as though drawn by breath. No window was open. No wind stirred the room. My grandmother saw it too and whispered, "Someone knows this house." She reached to snuff the candle, but before she could touch it, the flame bent farther still. Then came the knock. Polite, patient. We did not answer. At dawn, the candle was cold and dark, but wax had run across the sill, from a flame that should have gone out.
The last couple of days, God has been telling me to remind his people to be careful with what you receive from people. Be careful with what you eat from people. Be careful with what you drink from people. The Bible tells us that the enemy, he comes to kill, steal, and to destroy. You must know those that labor among you. You must use wisdom in everything that you do. Witchcraft is real. Demonic powers are real. Don't think for a second that there isn't an assignment sent by the enemy against your life. Pray always. Use discernment always, because not everyone has your best interest at heart. The Lord said, tell my people to be very careful with what you receive from people. Examine a person's heart. Test every spirit to see whether or not they are of God.
What's the most haunted place in Connecticut? Number 5, Mark Twain House, Hartford. Twain's former home is linked to whispers, footsteps, and odd noises, especially near his billiard room. Some report a woman in white, or even the scent of cigar smoke drifting through empty rooms. Number 4, Seaside Sanatorium, Waterford. Once a children's tuberculosis hospital, its tragic past fuels countless ghost stories. Investigators claim to hear crying or laughter, capture orbs, and record EVPs in abandoned hallways. Number 3, Sterling Opera House, Derby. This 1889 theater is known for shadow figures, voices, and toys moving on their own, often tied to a spirit called Andy. Visitors report orbs, apparitions, and strange sounds during walkthroughs. Number 2, Union Cemetery, Easton, home of the famous White Lady, seen drifting among graves or crossing the road at night. Many also report glowing red eyes in the woods. Number 1, Dudleytown, Cornwall, an abandoned cursed settlement with legends of strange lights, voices, and unsettling energy. Although off limits, stories of misfortune and eerie encounters persist. Which haunt seems the creepiest to you?
It's no coincidence that the most famous Christmas story is a ghost story. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens was first published in 1843. It tells the story of a man tormented by a series of ghosts the night before Christmas. This story belongs to a once rich, now nearly forgotten tradition of telling ghost stories on Christmas Eve. An old Victorian custom from the mid-1800s into the early 1900s, families would gather around their fireplace and share ghost stories with each other. The frigid weather and long nights were considered the best conditions to share spooky stories. The darker aspects of Christmas have their origins in pagan tradition, like the winter solstice celebration and the festival known as Yule. The darkest day of the year was seen by many as a time when the dead could have access to the living. Legend says that on Christmas Eve, ghosts could walk the earth and finish unsettled business. Unfortunately, the Victorian tradition of telling blood-curdling ghost stories with family around the fireplace on Christmas Eve has been almost completely forgotten. On this Christmas Eve, will you be keeping alive the Victorian tradition? Let me know if you decide to watch Krampus or How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Stay curious.
On the outskirts of town, shrouded in mist and silence, stands a crumbling church with shattered stained glass and doors forever ajar. Locals whisper that on Christmas Eve, the air grows thick with frost and the bells, long rusted, toll softly at midnight, their mournful chimes carried on the icy wind. As legend goes, a century ago, the church choir gathered for their final carol. Unaware, a terrible blizzard raged outside, trapping them within the ancient stone walls. Despite desperate prayers and frantic attempts to escape, no rescue ever came. When spring finally thawed the frozen land, the townspeople found only their hymn books, frozen open to the last carol, lying scattered among the snowdrifts. Now each Christmas Eve, those brave or foolish enough to pass by the church claim to hear a chilling harmony drifting from within. Ethereal voices rise and fall, singing a haunting melody that echoes through the empty pews and broken rafters. Some say, if you listen too closely, the music will draw you in, and you'll see shadowy figures standing in the candlelit ruins, their mouths open in song, their eyes wide and pleading for release from their eternal winter prison. The forgotten carol lingers, a ghostly echo of Christmas past, forever trapped in a frozen moment of sorrow and song.
When we say Victorian Christmas ghost stories, most of us think immediately of Charles Dickens, and for good reason. Dickens practically resurrected the tradition with A Christmas Carol, a tale brimming with rattling chains, time-split visions, and spirits intent on moral reckoning. But what many forget is that Dickens wrote dozens of Christmas ghost stories. Arguably most masterful is The Signalman. Imagine a railway cutting through rock, a narrow gorge, a steep wall, slick with damp moss, and the ever-present tremor of trains passing overhead. in that shadowed world was the signalman, a solitary figure who confides in the narrator that he is haunted, not by flesh and blood, but by a spectral apparition appearing in the tunnel mouth.
Is there anything more terrifying than a child ghost? In the cold winter of 1852, the Christmas edition of Household Words carried Elizabeth Gaskell's chilling tale, The Old Nurse's Story. It begins with an old woman recounting the story of when she was a girl. She was sent to work as a nurse in a grand, remote manor, perched atop the frozen moors. One day the nurse left the girl in the servant's charge while they made mince pies in the kitchen, and she went to church. And in that brief moment, the child vanished. Hours passed, and she was discovered on the frozen moors barely alive, shivering and whispering that a little girl had led her away. But the most terrifying night was yet to come. In the great hall, the nurse witnessed a child's ghost at the window, hammering silently against the glass, its mouth stretched wide in a scream that no living ear could hear. Somewhere in the drifting shadows, something watches. Tonight we tell stories to make even the warmest heart shiver. First, the Cailleach, the one-eyed Scottish hag sweeping across the barren land, bringing winter's cold and hunger to those who dare linger in the fields too long. Then Gryla, the giantess of Iceland, whose eyes gleam in the dark, seeking naughty children to drag back to her icy cave. And finally the Yule Cat, her enormous silent companion, prowling the snow-covered farms, ready to strike those who fail to earn the warmth of new clothes before Christmas. So gather close and wrap yourself in blankets and candlelight, for these are the top 3 most terrifying Christmas folklore creatures, and the frost that follows them bites sharper than any winter wind. Forget Santa. Victorian Christmases belonged to the dead. Back then, the nights were long, the houses were silent, and most homes were lit only by the flicker of candles and the dim orange glow of the fireplace. Families would gather close to the warmth while the rest of the house fell into deep shadow. Long corridors, unlit staircases, and dark recesses where the firelight couldn't reach. Victorians believed those hidden corners were places where spirits lingered, watching. Today we're stepping back into that world and exploring 3 of the most terrifying Victorian Christmas ghost stories you've probably never heard of. Are the shadows that move in the snowy storms hallucinations or wandering souls? Ross Island, Antarctica sits isolated in the frozen southern seas, a harsh icy outpost surrounded by endless white. In 1979, tragedy struck the island. In New Zealand, 2 pilots, both highly experienced, took their seats in the cockpit of a sightseeing flight. The flight ended in catastrophe. The plane crashed into the frozen slopes of Mount Erebus, taking the lives of all 257 people on board. In the aftermath, McMurdo Station became a grim storage for the bodies. Visitors claimed to have heard ghostly footsteps and voices echoing in empty halls. Visitors and staff have spoken of ghostly figures resembling the pilots, sometimes seen gliding through the frosted windows of McMurdo's buildings, or lingering near the monuments built to honour those who perished.
The reference to scary ghost stories in the song It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year by Andy Williams is an interesting nod to a tradition that isn't as commonly associated with modern Christmas celebrations, but has roots in Victorian England and earlier folklore traditions. During the Victorian period in Britain, telling ghost stories at Christmas was quite popular. This tradition can be traced back to Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. His work exemplified how storytelling could be used for moral reflection and personal transformation. Now, in pre-Christian traditions, winter was a time when storytelling was a common way to pass long nights. In many cultures, the winter solstice was a time for tales of the supernatural, and people gathered around fires, which itself could be seen as a way to ward off the darkness and the cold of winter, and also evil spirits. These tales often served to educate, entertain, and sometimes to explain natural phenomena or moral lessons.
There'll be scary ghost stories and tales of the glories of Christmas.
There's a ghost in the darkness that only appears around Christmas, and it arrives on a train. On certain nights in December, especially around Christmas. A black, unmarked train appears on abandoned tracks. No lights, no number, no destination. Just doors that open, waiting. Legend says people who see it are already grieving, lost, or at a turning point in their lives. If you step inside, time doesn't move the same. Some stories say passengers never return. Others say they come back. But something about them is different. Old railroad workers warn, if you hear a train on Christmas night where no track should be, don't look for it. Come back tomorrow night. Another dark Christmas legend drops every night until Christmas. If you had the opportunity to explore the Black Christmas train, would you?
Christmas is for ghosts. The Victorians knew it. Jerome K. Jerome said it best in 1891. Nothing satisfies us on Christmas Eve but to hear each other tell authentic anecdotes about specters. Why Christmas? The solstice, the longest night. In older winters, people believed the sun had died, the veil had thinned, and the dead could wander. Before reindeer, the winter sky belonged to Odin's wild hunt, a storm of riders and hounds. See it, and you're done. Then Dickens industrialized the chill. His December extra Christmas numbers for all the year round packed in hauntings by Collins and Gaskell and sold in the hundreds of thousands. And raise a glass to M.R. James, the scholar who read a fresh ghost story by candlelight every Christmas Eve. His rule, if a ghost story is to be real, it must be slightly malevolent. Agreed. So, 4 sharp Gothic short stories for your Christmas fire. 1. The Abbot's Ghost by Louisa May Alcott, written under her sensational pen name A.M. Barnard. Vibe, Knives Out meets Bridgerton, Haunted. A Christmas house party, a ruined heir accused of forgery, and a spectral abbot who warns of treachery in the halls. Human minds are more full of mysteries than any written book. 2. The Old Nurse's Story by Elizabeth Gaskell, 1852. Vibe, The Shining in Crinolines. A nurse and her little charge in a snowbound manor. At the window, a phantom child tapping, leaving no footprints, begging for a playmate to freeze. I saw the little hands beating against the window panes, but no sound came. 3. The Phantom Coach by Amelia B. Edwards, 1864. Vibe, Polar Express from Hell. Lost on the moor, a man flags down a speeding coach. Inside, blue-lipped passengers who don't breathe. The wheels roar without sound. I asked myself for the first time, what deed of mystery, long forgotten, would be revealed to my eyes? As Stoker would later put it, the dead travel fast. 4. Markheim by Robert Louis Stevenson, 1885. Vibe, Crime and Punishment in 15 pages. Christmas Day, a murder in an antique shop. Then a visitor appears, devil or conscience, and debates his soul over the cooling body. You would have me say that I am a favorite of the devil? The Victorians were right. The longest night demands a voice in the dark. Which one are you reading aloud this Christmas Eve? And who's brave enough to listen? Tell me in the comments. If you want more literary mischief, subscribe. Until next time, keep your candles lit and your prefaces loaded.
At 11 of the 12 Nights of Dark Christmas, and we're talking about ghost season in Scandinavia, which of course was Christmas time. In pre-Christian Nordic belief, Yule and the winter solstice time was not a cheerful time, but a liminal time. The sun was weakest due to the winter solstice, the boundary between the living and the dead was at its thinnest, and spirits, ancestors, and supernatural beings were thought to roam freely. When Christianity eventually arrived, these beliefs didn't disappear, but they were absorbed into Christian beliefs. And that created a uniquely haunted holiday season. First, we have the dead returning home for Christmas. The dead were thought to return to their homes on Christmas Eve, which was considered ghost night. All across Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland, houses were expected to be clean, quiet, and respectful. Tables were left set overnight for deceased relatives. Fires were kept burning to warm visiting spirits. People avoided loud celebrations and noises at night. And no cleaning or spinning of wool or any kind of spinning wheel was allowed due to the noise that it could create, because that could then disturb the dead, or the undead. If spirits were disrespected and these expectations were not followed, spirits were thought to be able to cause illness, death, or bad luck in the coming year. Then we have the Christmas Mass ghosts, which are some churchyard legends, and Christmas Eve Mass was actually called Midnight Mass of the Dead. Belief was that on Christmas Eve, the dead would rise from their graves to attend church. They would sit separately from the living, and anyone who recognized a dead person in the church service would risk death themselves. There are some slight variations of this legend. In Sweden, ghosts were thought to fill the church before the living arrived at all. In Norway, the dead were thought to leave muddy footprints throughout the church. And in Denmark, the ghosts might even drag the living into their graves with them. And some legends would warn that if you attended Mass too early, you would risk not going home alive. Church bells and bells around Christmas time were also thought to help protect people against these spirits. Church bells would ring out continuously on Christmas Eve. Iron objects were placed near doors, also for protection. Families would avoid traveling at night, believing that wraiths, drowned sailors, obviously ghosts, roamed the snowy darkness. Children were warned not to look out any windows at night. Silence was considered safer than celebration. So how does this differ from Victorian ghost stories like A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens? Unlike A Christmas Carol, Scandinavian ghosts are not moral teachers. They're not there to teach you a lesson. They're not sentimental, but they are territorial, ancient, and oftentimes very unforgiving. So some parts of Christmas were actually a dangerous time, not a cozy time. Why do these legends matter today? Because a lot of modern Christmas aesthetics, like candles, darkness, forests, still reflect a fear of winter, respect for the dead, and also the idea that joy can be fragile. Thanks for tuning in to night 11 of the 12 Nights of Dark Christmas. Stay tuned for the last one. See you guys in the next and last video for this series.
Christmas ghost stories were so popular during the Victorian era, they dedicated full magazine issues and novellas just to tell these stories. In honor of that tradition and in countdown to Christmas, I'm reading a true short ghost story every day. And today is day 27. I've heard this story from my parents as it happened when I was quite young, probably around 2 or 3. When we were staying at my grandparents' country home in England for Christmas. The house was quite big, and parts of it were a couple of 100 years old. I was put in a bedroom in the old part of the house, while my parents slept in the new part. My mom and dad had both stayed in that particular room before, and felt incredibly uneasy. I noticed that the little ornaments on a ledge on the wall would move around and be in different places. My mom had various dreams involving a dark, sinister, seeming man lurking in the room, but she just brushed it off as nothing. Anyway, one morning during breakfast, apparently I started rambling on about Santa Claus and how he visited me last night. To which my mom said he wasn't going to come for another few nights. Apparently, I got quite upset and insisted I saw Santa. I even went on to describe how he looked, saying he was wearing a red hat and jacket, but had a scary smile with pointed teeth and stood in the corner of that room. My mom got a really bad feeling and ended up moving me into a different bedroom after that, and I didn't mention Scary Santa ever again.
Feet crunching in snow don't always belong to the living. On Christmas Eve, especially when the snow falls thick and heavy, the villagers in this remote corner of the world swear they can hear it, a faint, muffled ringing. It's the sound of church bells, but there's no church here, not anymore. Not for centuries. The story goes that long ago, a devastating avalanche buried the old village church in the dead of winter. The bell ringer, a devoted old man, was still inside, pulling the ropes for the midnight service. He was buried alive, sealed in his belfry beneath tons of snow and stone. They say he never stopped ringing the bells, even as the cold crept in, his last act a defiant call in the silent dark. Now, centuries later, the legend persists. When the world is hushed by a fresh blanket of white, the phantom bells return. They echo up from the frozen ground, a sorrowful, lonely sound. The locals know better than to investigate. They lock their doors, stoke their fires, and pretend not to hear. But curiosity is a powerful thing, especially for outsiders who dismiss the tale as simple folklore. They say, if you follow the sound, if you let the ghostly chimes guide you across the snowfields, you'll eventually find the spot right above the buried steeple. The ringing will grow louder, clearer, as if calling just for you. And that's when it happens. The snow, seemingly solid, will suddenly give way beneath your feet. You'll plunge into the darkness below, into the frigid, silent earth. And as the snow softly fills in the hole you left behind, someone else takes your place, forever bound to the bell that tolls beneath the frost. You've been listening to Tales from the Vault. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more chills, because some stories, they don't stay buried for long.
Is this the best episode ever of A Ghost Story for Christmas? Is this one of the best ghost story adaptations of all time? It's The Signalman. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Sinead. I read a lot of spooky books, I watch a lot of spooky films, and this December I have been going through every episode in the original 1970 series, A Ghost Story for Christmas, reviewing them, recapping them, just because we love them so. I've created a playlist of all my videos so far, and you can watch every episode of this series for free on archive.org. That's Internet Archive. This series is famously difficult to get hold of in some places, but that is the place to go to watch them all. We've hit episode 6, 1976, and this is the first time the series did an adaptation that wasn't an M.R. James story. They went with The Signalman by Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens wrote many a cracking ghost story, not just A Christmas Carol, and this is an absolute banger if you haven't read it. I'm doing a full recap of this episode, so there will be spoilers ahead, and then sharing my thoughts about it at the end. The Signalman opens with a gentleman that we will know as the Traveller having a walk across countryside. He is a gentleman, he looks like he is well-to-do, he is well-dressed, and he comes to the top of a railway bridge, which we can see up here. He looks down and he sees the signalman standing on the track, and the signalman is staring straight at the tunnel with a very puzzled look on his face. The Traveller calls down to him, wanting to have some company. He calls out, "Hello, below there," waving at him. The signalman stares at him, and if you know what's happening, he's like, "What the fuck is that?" The Traveller comes down to the track and starts trying to make conversation with the signalman. Again, he doesn't have a first name, that's how we're going to know him. And the signalman is regarding him very warily still. He even snaps at him at one point, very suspicious, until the Traveller assures, "I'm just a man, I'm just here, I mean no harm," and the signalman relents. The pair go into the signalman's signal box, which is cozy. I love that box. I bloody love that box. It's very cozy, it's got a little fire, it's very cute. And this is where the signalman would do his work, and they chat quite amiably together, the signalman going around and doing his chores, you know, when he hears the bell ringing and he has to change the lines. But in the middle of their conversation, the signalman expresses sudden shock and fear. He turns and looks at the bell that is not ringing, but he seems to hear something from it. And he looks out of the window down at the mouth of the tunnel at the red warning light. The Traveller notes that he seems transfixed and unsettled. The signalman says he doesn't want to explain why, but he will the next night if the Traveller comes back to speak to him. The Traveller, meanwhile, has made himself absolutely at home in the box. He has just sort of had a nap by the fire. He comments that he thinks the signalman is a contented man, seems very impressed by his stature and his work, and is intrigued as to why he's a bit shaky. One thing the signalman asks is that when you come back at night, don't call out. The Traveller goes back to his inn. He is troubled by strange dreams that night, echoing some of the things that the signalman said. The Traveller does come back the next night. He shakes hands with the signalman and he agrees to tell him his story. The signalman explains that for some time now he has been haunted. He has been seeing a spectre at the mouth of the tunnel. He has been hearing a strange sound, like the vibration of the bell in his signal box that no one else can hear, but this very, very faint sound that we as the viewer can hear as well. It's this long tone and it's very uncanny. We see the spectre through the signalman's flashbacks. The entire area around the railway tracks, whether it is day or night, is very dark because of the dark mouth of the tunnel, because of the verges and the height of them and the size. But you see this hint of a figure entirely in black standing by the tunnel entrance, and you have to get so close to see him. The signalman has to get right up close, and you as a viewer, you cannot really see what's going on, but it's a figure in black, arm across his eyes, waving his hand. He also hears the spectre calling out, "Hello, below there," these warnings that come from nowhere. Hence why he was so freaked out when the Traveller used those words. It would be bad enough to be haunted alone, but the spectre's appearance foreshadows a disaster. On one occasion, it preceded a tunnel collision, a devastating accident in which two trains collided. Many people were killed, many people were injured. The signalman was there helping, witnessing all of that. Charles Dickens was involved in a train crash actually on a railway bridge, and he narrowly escaped with his life, and this is why he wrote the story. The spectre also appeared just before a train passed through the tunnel and a young woman was flung from the carriage. Did she jump Was she pushed? We have this gorgeous gothic image of this bride lying dead on the tracks, and the signalman, again, of course, witnessing this. Explaining all of this to the traveller, the signalman expresses his fear but also his frustration as why the spectre is appearing before him and why he can do nothing to prevent the disasters that follow. The traveller, though, set up as an educated gentleman, sticks to the idea of being rational. He listens to the stories, but he insists that the signalman must be rational. Stick to the rational. These are just coincidences. Don't fall into this world of speculation. These things can't be real. The traveller is very kind to the signalman. He calls him friend and genuinely seems to want to be his friend, but he is continually saying, you must be rational, this isn't true, stick to your work seems to be his advice, stay true to your work and all will be fine. The traveller departs and is again plagued by terrible dreams back in his inn. The next morning he is out walking in the countryside. We also see the signalman happily getting on with his day's work, and then both of them hear the sound of the bell, both the signalman in his box but also the traveller out in the countryside. Something rings in his ear and he realizes a disaster is imminent. He runs to the bridge where he first started the story. He sees a train approaching and he sees the signalman standing on the track below, clearly transfixed by the spectre again, and this time the train strikes the signalman and he is killed. The traveller rushes down and sees the train driver and the crew standing over the signalman's body. He asks what happened, and the train driver explains that he saw the signalman standing there and he called out, "Hello, below, below there," the same refrain that he has heard the spectre calling out. And the train driver put his hand across his face and was waving with his other arm in an attempt to move the signalman, indicating that the spectre was a foreshadowing of the signalman's own demise. We see the horrified face of the traveller mimicking the face of the spectre, and the film ends. If you were to watch one episode of A Ghost Story for Christmas, I would say choose The Signalman. I think it is a masterpiece. It is definitely my favourite. It is up there with the best of the rest of the series. It is a wonderful adaptation of a ghost story. It is still chilling every time I watch it, and I've watched it several times. I still get a shudder seeing that spectre so well done in this film, of that spectre you can barely see and getting close, and what does it mean? Denham Elliott as the Signalman, I think, transforms this film. I love him as an actor. That frustration and the anger that he feels about wanting to understand what it is feels palpable without ever going into hysteria, and this sort of quiet sense of duty that he has never feels overly sentimental. Bernard Lloyd as the traveller does a great job of being this very clipped gentleman and really fixated on the rational. You do wonder, what is the traveller's motivation? He seems like a lonely man, or a man who wants to make a friend, or maybe he thinks that he wants to observe the working man, which the signalman is, and offer his advice. But there's no indication that the traveller has any kind of life experience that can match that of the signalman. The signalman who has seen terrible things aside from the haunting, the train disaster, the bride's death. He has been affected by these things, and you can well understand it would actually be rational if he started really having a breakdown or an incident. Whether that's actually happening in this film or whether he is truly being haunted is up to the viewer to decide. We see the ghosts, but are they manifestations? And it's a very bleak story in the end, because the spectre is tormenting the signalman, and we don't get an indication of what he may have done to deserve this. It is showing him, foreshadowing these disasters that he cannot stop, and foreshadowing his own demise, and he can do nothing about it. Is it fate? Are there things in this world that are beyond our control, that are beyond the rationalization of the rational man? I adore it. It is my favourite episode, just up there with A Warning to the Curious. If you can watch The Signalman this Christmas Eve, you are in for a treat of a ghost story, and I'm sorry if you don't get any sleep. We're nearing the end of my wrap-ups of the 1970s series. We have 2 more episodes to go. They're coming in one video because they're See you soon.
Life's better with Christmas lights on your window.